It stands alone, silent, its purpose still a mystery.
The stones stand there as though they're saying something, and folklore has built up around it century after century.
It took thousands of years to construct, but no one can say for certain who built it.
There's something quite magical about it. I have the feeling that the people who built it had something very strongly in mind, maybe more than the astronomy.
It may be a place of burial, a temple, a sophisticated observatory, or perhaps all of these and more. It is called Stonehenge.
Beyond what is known lies an unexplored world of shadows and phantoms. A land that knows no limits of time or space. From the dawn of discovery to the nightfall of catastrophe. Journey to a universe of the unexplained, the unforeseen, the unbelievable. A place beyond reality where no question will go unanswered. A place where myth and legend are law, superstition a science. Travel to a world of secrets and mysteries.
It's time for our journey to begin. What is your purpose? How were you built? Stonehenge, an enigma. Knowledge surrounds these library walls, and with these instruments, that knowledge can be ours. All that can be learned from them is that they are. The author of Robinson Crusoe, Daniel Defoe, wrote those words in the 1700s about a strange monument that was ancient even then. Stonehenge. That place has become a metaphor for the magnificent, the unfathomable, and the mysterious. There's much we do know about this handful of huge stones, strewn in geometric precision on Salisbury Plain in England. It seems as if Stonehenge has always been here. When the Romans occupied Britain around the time of Christ, Stonehenge was waiting for them. They built their camps nearby and battled the fierce Celts who occupied the area. It was the Romans who first associated Stonehenge with the Celtic high priests called Druids, an association that has stubbornly persisted ever since. The first modern description we have of Stonehenge comes from an archdeacon in 1130, who wrote that no one can conceive how such great stones have been raised aloft or why they were built there. And like the Druid myth, that statement too has lived on. The word Stonehenge comes from two Old English words. The first, stan, meaning a stone, and the second, henge, meaning hinge. Stonehenge was already known by that name even in medieval times. And during those dark ages, many theories were propounded as to how it was built.
The biggest theory, I suppose, is that in the time of King Arthur, Merlin the wizard was asked to build a great monument in the south of England for slain nobles.
How they moved them is a mystery. I doubt that Merlin did it with magic. I think that it was hard work, but I don't know how they did it.
The best explanation for getting those stones to the vicinity of Stonehenge probably involves the dragging on sledges of these stones overland. Probably the real clue is winter. If you're going to move stones around, it's going to be a lot easier to do it on sledges if you have a snowy, icy surface, just like with skis. And it may be that people who had to rely on their ingenuity did just that.
Stonehenge was constructed in 3 distinct phases, spanning 2,000 years. Phases that began in a period known as the Late Bronze Age. How a group of technically unsophisticated farmers were able to transport and erect these huge stones has been widely debated, but Stonehenge stands today, and several theories about its construction are worth pursuing. Many arguments center on the huge sarsen stones that give Stonehenge its unique shape. They're not found near the chalky plain of Salisbury, so they had to be brought from afar. It's thought that they followed this route, dragged by sledges or perhaps brought down this river. Once at this site, the multi-ton sarsens were thought to have been lifted by the use of carefully stacked mats and brute force. These unyielding stones could only be carved by using tools from the same material, and they were put together like furniture, with carved dowels and holes to receive them. The ancients built well, and the length of time it took to build Stonehenge indicates countless hours of effort. It's incredible to think that men dedicated their lives and the lives of their children and their children's children to such a monumental task. But the proof is there. Why was Stonehenge built? What purpose could inspire such incredible devotion and persistence? As we have seen, one of the most enduring myths of Stonehenge is that it was a place of Druid worship. This is untrue.
The who of Stonehenge is pretty well established to have been local people, and it certainly was not, not the Druids. In the first place, they liked forests. Stonehenge is on a pretty bare plain. Second place, they weren't there. Third place, they weren't even in existence when Stonehenge was first built.
Other theories ranged from a Roman monument to a graveyard, to a temple of the Phoenicians, to a construction by a band of wandering architects from the lost city of Troy. But in 1965, the first credible theory was proposed, not by an archaeologist, but by an astronomer, Gerald Hawkins.
First, I went to Stonehenge and took photographs of the sunrise, and I looked through the archways to see that there was a clear view to the horizon. And then the National Geographic funded an aerial survey from which I was able to take exact measurements and calculate what would have been seen around 2000 BC. I had done a lot of calculations by hand, and I used the computer to check out what I'd done and calculate a few more of what we call alignments. And I found that Stonehenge was connected to a pattern in the sky. The sun and moon make a pattern, and Stonehenge and its structure are locked to that pattern. And so one could call Stonehenge a sort of marker for the seasons of the year and the seasons of the moon.
The great British archaeologist Jacquetta Hawkes, who has absolutely no use for Hawkins and his theories, she says, quote, "Every age has the Stonehenge it desires and deserves," end of quote. I do believe that's exactly right. The possibility of actually knowing what they intended is just about zero because they didn't write anything down, so you're free to speculate, and the Hawkins speculation is about as good as any to date. I have the feeling that the people who built it had something very strongly in mind, maybe more than the astronomy and the worship. And I wish to goodness I knew what it was, and maybe I never will.
Stonehenge is fantastic, but not completely unique. England is literally covered in circles of stone, seemingly scattered about the countryside. But they and Stonehenge may be a part of a network of powerful magnetic lines called ley lines, a web that some say still has power over the lives of men. Could these lines exist? Why was the location of Stonehenge the site for 2,000 years of construction? And why do some places get the reputation